crush your enemies.
They drew first blood, not me.
See them driven before you.
Oh, my user.
And hear the lamentation of your women.
But I pity the fool.
Glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate.
Oh no.
They're here.
Oh, real light sleeper, child.
Welcome to Vintage Video, where we're rewatching the 80s so you don't have to. We'll be reviewing every major film release of the 1980s in chronological order, overanalyzing what you've seen and spoiling what you haven't. I'm Patrick O'Reilly.
I'm Jesse Bayless.
And I'm Richard Wells.
And today we're discussing The Chosen, released April 30th, 1982. It was written by Edwin Gordon, based on the novel by Chaim Potok, rewritten uncredited by Jeremy Kagan, directed by Jeremy Kagan, and released by 20th Century Fox. Kirsten Dunst was born today, April 30th.
Oh, wow.
Happy birthday, Kirsten Dunst. Chaim Potok's novel, The Chosen, was published in 1967. The story is faithfully adapted into today's film, and the book form was followed by a second book entitled The Promise, telling the next few chapters of Danny and Reuven's friendship. In 1988, the first book was also adapted into a short-lived off-Broadway stage musical. Producer Arnold Nathanson optioned the film rights soon after its publication, but obviously the big screen adaptation took another decade and a half to come to fruition due to difficulties securing funding for a period religious story that would require New York locations. By then, it had been handed off to producers William W. Goodman and Charles Roth. At one point, actors Walter Matthau and Eli Wallach were both vying for the director's chair, and presumably a starring role each. But Paul Bogart, no relation to Humphrey, was the first director officially attached. Before production began, the producers were swapped out yet again, this time for Edie and Eli Landau, and Bogart was replaced by credited director Jeremy Paul Kagan. The film was one of 14 to secure special permission from SAG to continue production through the 1980 strike. They were also permitted to cast members of the Hasidic community to serve as extras to save money costuming people. Because the costumes didn't change much.
Yeah.
Bring your own.
Yeah. Upon his casting as Reb Saunders, Rod Steiger, who shares the man's initials, reportedly spent 8 hours a day for 2 weeks learning Yiddish. On a budget of $3 million, it brought in $3.2 million, barely paying for itself. For his performance, Steiger was awarded Best Actor at the Montreal Film Festival. The film starts with a montage of radio snippets. We hear historical speeches from the Second World War, public service announcements encouraging the public to contribute to the war effort, clips from popular sitcom radio shows of the time, and eventually we're just hearing the film's score. As the camera pans across the length of Brooklyn Bridge, we hear a voice describing what sounds like war commentary, but turns out to be baseball talk, about keeping a solid defense as the camera settles on a fenced-in concrete baseball diamond in Brooklyn, New York, 1944. Bizarrely, we cut around the batter hitting the ball so that the first pitch cuts directly to the ball rolling into the outfield and makes it look like the pitcher threw it the wrong way. I was like, what sport are they even playing? The game is suddenly paused for the arrival of a crowd of Hasidic Jewish teen boys. Evidently, these are students of a rival school, and they will face off today on the diamond. We start the exposition with internal monologue from one of our co-leads, Reuven Malter, played by Barry Miller. He suggests he might never have met our second lead, Danny Saunders, played by Robby Benson, were it not for the events of World War II. Jewish people were unfairly characterized as weak in the media and made deliberate efforts to showcase their physical fitness in exhibition games like these between different offshoots of the Jewish faith. Reuven is a modern Orthodox Jew.
For Danny was a member of a very Orthodox group of Jews called Hasidim. They wore their hair and clothes the same way their ancestors did hundreds of years ago in Eastern Europe. You could see them on Saturday, Shabbos. They would hurry off to their small synagogues to pray and to study the holy books, the Torah and the Talmud.
As the arriving boys take their place on the diamond, they're quickly underestimated, especially after a first flailing batter whiffs 3 strikes in rapid succession.
I don't think this is their game. They should stick to praying.
But when Danny steps up to the plate, it's clear he knows what he's doing. Even the coach sees it and orders the boys on the field to back up expecting a hit. Field in quotes, I guess. It's not really a field.
Right.
I feel like when they put the first batter up and he strikes out all those times, I'm like, oh, they're hustling him.
Oh,
like,
that makes sense. It's like, hey, why don't we make a quick wager after that first batter?
Also, I feel like the baseball field isn't regulation.
Right.
So I feel like getting a home run is probably really easy.
Everything has to be grounders here, or else it's like not fair and you're going to cost the neighborhood some windows. Even the other players on Reuven's team recognize Danny on sight.
Reuven, move back. That's Danny Saunders. He can hit.
On the first pitch, Danny cracks the ball right over the pitcher's head and books it to second beside second baseman Reuven.
That was a nice shot. You always hit like that to the pitcher?
Danny doesn't respond. By the end of the inning, the Hasidic students have already run up the scoreboard. When Danny is up to bat again, Reuven is pitching now. He throws a couple of balls and a strike, but his third ball would have hit Danny if he hadn't caught the pitch barehanded. As we foreshadowed a moment ago, Danny's first hit sends the ball careening into Reuven's face, shattering his glasses into his eyes and effectively ending the game. No coincidence, I'm sure, that the conflict between the boys begins with the breaking of glass, just as Kristallnacht marked a significant escalation of anti-Semitic violence overseas, though these boys subscribe to different branches of the same root faith. We cut right to Reuven recovering in a hospital as his father arrives, Professor David Malter, played by Maximilian Schell. The boy has a patch over one eye, and his dad explains the doctors removed a splinter of glass from his eye, a piece of his shattered lens. Dad assures the boy that the operation was a success and he'll be fine, before admitting that they won't know for some time if he's lost all sight in the affected eye.
Sorry, just to go back to the breaking glass thing. In Jewish culture, you break a glass at the wedding. Like you step on a glass. So this is like their...
Which we all learned in Lethal Weapon 4.
But I'm just saying, like, this is their marriage. Like now they're tied together.
That's cute. Dad is overcome with a coughing fit and takes a seat beside Reuven's bed, but I'm sure it's one of those benign coughs that movie characters literally never have, and not an indication that he's sick or dying. Mr. Malter says he's received multiple calls from Danny's father checking on the boy. He's relayed an apology from Danny, but Reuven thinks it's insincere, suspecting the boy did it on purpose, either because he always hits right for the pitcher's head, or in response to the pitch that almost hit him. Mr. Malter gives him a radio to stay up to date on the war and shares some promising news about Rome being free from German occupation. Reuven tries to read a newspaper, but Dad doesn't want him straining his eyes and congratulates him on a legitimate excuse to ignore his homework for now. We jump forward in time to the arrival of a second bedside visitor, Danny, in the same Hasidic dress he will don for almost the entire film.
Spoiler alert.
What?
Almost.
Well, there's that one nude scene. What? No, there's not.
That's a major spoiler alert.
Yeah.
I don't even think I caught that.
Does it count as a spoiler if I completely made it up? He's here to apologize in person, and Reuven isn't happy to see him. He turns up his radio to drown out Danny's apology. We see Reuven arrive home from the hospital. Reuven worries via internal monologue about his eye never healing. Later, he sits at a piano, and on the way out, his father reminds him not to strain his eyes reading music. Almost immediately, someone rings the doorbell, and Reuven is face to face again with Danny Saunders. He tries again to apologize, but starts by admitting that during the game, he had, in fact, felt an unexplainable urge to kill Reuven. Reuven admits that he was surprised by the boy's skill with the bat, since as far as he knew, Danny's people spent every second studying the Talmud. Danny says his father only requires him to work through 4 pages a day, so he has time to invest in other interests. Reuven doubts 4 pages a day is even possible.
I can do 1 page, and I'm very good. And even then, I need my father to come help me.
I have total recall.
Prove it.
And he whips out a DVD. No. But instead, he spends a few seconds memorizing a random article from the front page and then recites it back from memory. Reuven is impressed. Danny wishes him a quick recovery from his injury, but on the bright side, Reuven says he looks like Errol Flynn. The reference is lost on Danny, who reveals he's never seen a film in his life, since Hasidic Jews don't get the Rumspringa experience of their Christian equivalents, the Mennonites. I've seen some movies, though, and I'm still not totally clear what Reuven meant. He mentions Flynn's Robin Hood and Captain Blood characters by name, but neither one wore an eye patch, and I wasn't able to find a single photo of Flynn wearing one, though he was a frequent collaborator of one-eyed actor-turned-director Raoul Walsh. Reuven launches into a song on the piano he explains his mother taught him. They hear Mr. Malter typing in the next room, and Danny admits that he's familiar with the man's writings about the Talmud, and that his own father does not approve. Reuven invites Danny's father to write his own articles, but evidently it's not his way. He prefers silence. Before leaving, Danny offers his assistance with schoolwork down the line if it would be helpful. Another jump in time, and Danny sits with Reuven in a garden trying to memorize Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. Danny encourages him to focus on the meaning of the words and not just the text. He asks about Reuven's dreams, and Reuven mentions a recent dream about a king, inspiring Danny to discuss the phonetics of certain Hebrew words.
Do you know the Hebrew for king?
Of course, melech.
And for clown or fool?
Lemech.
The word for king, melech, begins with an M and then an L. Whereas the word for fool Lemech begins with the L and then the M.
So what?
In Hebrew, the word for intellect is moach, begins with an M. And the word for heart, the seat of passion?
Lev.
Lev, that's correct. Begins with an L. So you see, Reuven, if you put the M in front of the L, the head in front of the heart, then you're a king. But if you put the L in front of the M, the heart in front of the head, then you're a fool.
You're calling me a fool?
No. But don't you see the importance that the symbols in our dreams can have?
Not really, no. Doesn't really pertain to what I was talking about at all. I just watched a show about a king before I went to sleep. That's all.
It feels like a little bit of a stretch if we're just talking about the first letters of these words.
No,
There's a lot of words with these first letters.
My guess is that they're just trying to show that he puts a lot of thought into things, and he has aspirations of understanding how literally everything works instead of just studying the surface level of what he's learning.
He's also a Freudian.
Right, yeah.
So the interpretation of dreams is also very important.
Yeah. Danny admits that not all these revelations came directly from the Talmud, and admits that he spent some of his hard-earned free time in libraries, expanding his knowledge beyond the boundaries his father sets. Danny explains he met a man in the library who's been recommending classic novels to fuel the boy's curiosity. He's graduated from the great novelists into the world of psychology, and seems fascinated by all of it, but he's still worried his dad will find out. Reuven mentions he has his sights set on Hirsch College after graduation, and Danny admits that's his preference too, but his father will only approve rabbinical yeshiva. The next day, Danny finds Reuven hanging out with classmates and invites him to the Saunders home to meet his father, Reb Saunders. Apparently, his father has to approve all his friends. Rather than the private introduction I was expecting, Reuven seems to have been invited to a full-scale religious service, and there are 60 or so men in the house. When they have a moment, Reb Saunders asks Reuven if he knows the Torah and Talmud, and then, after a round of singing, Reb Saunders tells some stories from the Talmud and asks Danny if there were any mistakes in the story he told. Danny points out a few intentional errors, and Saunders congratulates him for getting them right. Unexpectedly, he points the next round of questions to Reuven, and after a minor slip, he's able to answer correctly, and the room celebrates the boys for their knowledge of the Torah and Talmud. After the celebration's over, Danny walks Reuven through the house and quickly points out his mother and sister Shaindel. Reuven admits that he was a bit stressed by the public questioning, but Danny enjoys it, and everyone else seems to have a good time. He tells Reuven the story of how Reb Saunders was shot and left for dead in Russia, but when he recovered, he led his people out of Russia to America, which he saw as a best move for them. Reuven is impressed the rabbi has such power over his followers, and that they would sail to America and start their lives over.
They all followed him just like that? Huh. Of course. They would have followed him anywhere. I don't understand that. I don't know any rabbi who has that kind of power. No, Reuven. My father is not just a rabbi. He's a tzaddik, a righteous man, a bridge between his followers and God.
Danny admits that he brought up the prospect of Hirsch College with his father again, but his father doesn't speak with him outside of the spot the difference Talmud game.
I'd hate that. To not have my father talk to me.
The boys meet with Reb Saunders again, and he gives their friendship his blessing, despite Mr. Malter's career scientifically criticizing the sacred words of the Talmud. Later, Mr. Malter understands.
We come from two totally different approaches. He thinks Torah was written by God, and I think it was written by man, inspired by God.
Huge difference. Oh my God. How could you ever possibly overcome?
Well, this is the ridiculousness of most religions.
Yeah.
Is they're all practically the same, but we have to act like they're very different.
Malter freely admits Reb Saunders is the better writer, even if they have their disagreements. Malter admits further that Danny possesses his father's gift, and it's sad that his family insists on closing the boy in from the world. Reuven mentions that Danny would rather go to Hirsch College, and Mr. Malter thinks it would do the boy a lot of good. Sometime later, Danny and Reuven are walking through the neighborhood and pick an inconvenient moment to practice a few words in the German language and catch the attention of boys on a nearby stoop. They are presumed to be sympathetic to the German cause and throw Reuven hard to the ground, and Danny defends his honor by laying one of the boys out with an enthusiastic right cross. So enthusiastic that he throws himself to the ground, I think, with the tornado force of his punch. At Danny's home later, Mr. Saunders walks in on the family treating Reuven's wounds and worries he's a bad influence. Sometime later, Danny is studying in the library, and Reuven enters with two surprises. His eye has healed, and he wants to introduce his father. Turns out, Mr. Malter is the man that Danny had mentioned earlier, who's been assigning him reading recommendations for months. Sometime later, Reuven stops by the Saunders home looking for Danny, but he's not home. His sister Shaindel invites him in anyway. It's clear they're interested in each other, but before they've even left the entry hall, Reuven is summoned up to Reb Saunders' office for a conversation. It's come to his attention that Danny is partaking in books outside their home library, and even studying works recommended by Mr. Malter. Reuven feels trapped and confirms everything. Saunders asks Reuven a favor in an effort to preserve his relationship with his son, but we cut away before hearing it. When Danny learns Reuven is in his dad's office, he knows the secret is out. It turns out Reuven's conversation with Mr. Saunders was a productive one, though, and his father has officially given Danny his blessing to attend Hirsch College with Reuven. So it's like he called him in to say, can you help me have a better relationship with my son? What can I do? And he probably said, you can let him do what he wants to do because you already know that he cares about you and cares about the faith. We jump forward into their college educations, and Danny is disappointed when his professors attempt to delegitimize psychologists that Mr. Malter introduced him to. They take all the humanity out of it and treat psychology as a strict science. Reuven tries to cheer him up with a visit to a local art museum. Danny's fascinated, and we jump forward again to the end of World War II and people celebrating in the streets. A celebrating stranger kisses Danny, which he views as a religious violation, but Reuven rushes him to get over it. That night, Danny is studying and follows the sound of his father's singing to a sibling's room. He watches for a moment and seems to envy the child, since those years of his own childhood were spent with silence between them. Later, Danny's getting a new set of glasses made by the family optometrist, and Reuven suggests he try them out watching his first movie, 1945's Thrill of a Romance starring Van Johnson and Esther Williams. I feel like I would have picked a sci-fi or a monster movie for a first outing. Something that couldn't just as easily have been performed on stage.
Sure.
And not a date movie.
Right. The film ends with a short Universal newsreel titled Nazi Murder Mills, detailing the mass slaughter of Jews by the German government. The narration for the newsreel footage is credited to Ed Herlihy, who narrated the original reel, but I'd bet dollars to donuts this is actually Frank Welker's voice, impersonating Herlihy's so they could use their own script.
Unsuspecting European Jews were deported in cattle cars to such camps as Buchenwald.
We last heard Welker use this voice at the start of Zorro the Gay Blade, providing the backstory of the masked hero.
To protect the poor and downtrodden people, there emerged a mysterious swordsman who pledged his life in the service of justice.
I mostly recognize the voice from all the newsreel-type narrations he used to do on Saturday morning cartoon shows, especially the Animaniacs.
Yeah. Animaniacs for sure.
Here at the studio's new animation department, the artist toiled endlessly to come up with cartoon stars, ultimately creating 3 new characters, the Warner Brothers and their sister Dot.
Hello, nurse!
Danny has never seen this footage directly and is understandably horrified by it. And I watched the actual reel today. Much worse.
Really?
Yeah. Like literally YouTube brought up a disclaimer that I had to click through that said this is extremely disturbing material before you could even watch
what they included in this movie was pretty incredibly disturbing.
It's worse. It's worse.
I found it seemed hard to believe that they would even allow that to be presented in a theater.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, I know it's public news, but also just...
Well, I felt like the newsreels used to go in front of the movie, not at the end, but maybe... For stuff like this, it was like, hey, you're going to have an opportunity to book it out of the room as soon as the song's end so that we don't ruin your entire day with this footage. But I mean, it was important for people to see it, but still, it's like, it just seems weird to tack this onto the end of a musical with some, big happy ending. Sometime later, Mr. Malter is leaving town for work, and Reuven is invited to stay with the Saunders family. During his time with the family, Reuven flirts a bit more with Shaindel and is invited to every family party and event. Danny sees Reuven's interest in his sister and pulls him aside to inform him Shaindel is already set to be married.
Her marriage contract was arranged when she was just a child. She's going to marry the son of another Rebbe.
Has she met him?
Once, twice.
Does she like him?
I don't know. I never asked her.
Over dinner, the conversation turns to the proposed establishment of a new state for the Jewish people. As a strict interpreter of the Torah, Reb Saunders is offended at the suggestion.
Who are these people?
Well,
it is written that the Messiah and the Messiah only will bring the Jews to the new land. Only the Messiah, when he comes, will bring them. And God will help build their new land. That's what written God, not Ben Gurion and his henchmen. No! Never!
The conversation essentially ends there, and that night, Danny explains that his father is deeply opposed to the establishment of a Jewish state and begs his friend not to discuss it any further, which is where the film, intentionally or otherwise, delivers the core message that what religion does best is separate people and turn them against each other. Even within a single faith, there can be multiple factions at each other's throats because they disagree over the meanings of a few words written millennia ago by people who knew nothing about how the world works. Reb Saunders is driven into a rage by the suggestion that a Jewish state be established, not because it would require taking land from an existing civilization, but because his old book says a different person is supposed to do that. Imagine if 2,000 years from now people are threatening to go to war with each other over whether or not Han shot first. It makes exactly as much sense. Reuven suddenly feels truly uncomfortable here, and we flash forward to his father's return. His father works tirelessly to promote the establishment of a Jewish state, but the sidewalks are crowded with Hasidic Jews passing out literature against it.
No state of Israel without the Messiah! Fight the Jewish goyim that want to make a false state of Israel!
Most of the rest of the movie is these two groups arguing with each other based on their own interpretations of the same religious text. Mr. Malter and Mr. Saunders each become figureheads of the opposing causes. The arguments even spill over into school, and fights routinely break out between the children of people on both sides. Danny informs Reuven that because of Mr. Malter's position in the debate, Danny is forbidden from speaking with him anymore.
You've been excommunicated officially.
What?
I'm not to see you, talk to you, listen to you, or be found within 4 feet of you.
Danny insists he will not defy his father, and they can no longer be friends. Another obvious consequence of strict religious beliefs. If Danny had a better relationship with his father, he wouldn't be so desperate to appease him. Mr. Saunders has taught Danny well to blindly obey his instructions. Mr. Malter this whole time has wanted the boys to forge a true relationship. He would never banish his son from reading outside information or befriending people he disagrees with. But still, he's so preoccupied with the cause, he doesn't pay his son the attention he needs in the absence of his best friend. Wanting to please his father, Reuven takes the dangerous step of joining an underground group shipping weapons overseas in aid of the establishment of a Jewish state. They pack huge crates of guns onto ships all night, and Mr. Malter is at first furious with Reuven for staying out.
I wish there was a consequence here.
Right?
I feel like that's what this moment needed.
Yeah.
I think...
I mean, the closest thing we get to a consequence is one of the other kids is hurt.
I realize that, but I think both sides needed there to be consequences for their staunch opinions, their unbending, you know, thoughts on this subject. And
instead, Reuven's dad gets everything he wants.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that he's like, I'm really upset with you for staying out late at night. He's like, oh, but I was running guns. It's like, I was like, oh, well, that's okay then.
Right.
You're only assisting with the genocide of a people. That's fine.
Oh, that's great. Why anyone would approve of their kid putting his life on the line to deliver weapons for people to shoot at each other is beyond me.
Yeah.
Sometime later, Reuven is hosting a dance party in his home, and a girl drags him away to make out in his father's office, but they find Mr. Malter unconscious on the floor. He's been here for 4 days. No wonder he didn't answer my note that I slipped under the door about having a party.
At most, he was in there for 7 minutes.
Oh, okay. Or they made out for 7 minutes and then they noticed the body on their way out. We cut right to a hospital where we learn he's alive but recovering from a stroke, possibly from overworking himself for the cause.
The doctor says he's recovering well, but then we go in there and he's like in an oxygen tent.
Right. He's in like a bubble.
And he's all stroked out with his face. Is like, that's not recovering well.
So you want to see some people who aren't recovering well? I'll take you to the next room. They're dead. Eventually, the UN takes a vote and the establishment of the Jewish state of Israel is approved by the world powers. Once the issue has been decided on a national level, Danny is given permission to reconnect with Reuven, but the fact that he waited until his father approved on this matter shows that Danny is a bad friend. He was willing to go to the library against his father's wishes, but not to talk to his best friend, suffering alone and with his father in the hospital.
I hate you and I hate your father for what you did. It's sadistic.
You hate me?
No, I don't hate you. I don't understand you. I'm glad that you're back.
Reuven and Danny go to speak with Reb Saunders, and because religion often feels like another language to me, I honestly don't understand most of what he says. But like any abusive parent, he tries to imply that he had no choice in how he treated Danny, and that everything he did was to make Danny stronger. A lot of boy named Sue bullshit when all he had to do was be around and be nice to the kid.
I had to teach my Daniel that way. To the wisdom and the pain. of silence, as my father did to me.
So it was just a reinfliction of generational trauma, and tradition, as always, is very gross.
And why was he doing this to Danny specifically and not his younger brother?
Right? You got other kids. You're not being super cruel to all of them. But he's like, you're the smart one, so I have to be super mean to you so that you're mean to your kid, or else he won't be mean to his kid, and then his kid is going to have a happy childhood. Cruelty from someone you love is not a learning experience. Reb Saunders ironically takes great pride in having eradicated his son's sense of pride. He taught his son not to be better than most people. Be the same shitty person as everybody else, please. At the end of his meandering excuse, Reb Saunders admits he thinks he did everything right. He does at least give Danny his blessing to pursue a career in psychology, as long as he keeps the Jewish faith in his heart. Which is like me telling my daughter, yes, you can be a surgeon, but always remember in your heart you're a Hufflepuff. In my entire life, I honestly can't think of a time I've ever needed my parents' permission to do anything. And these boys are practically adults begging their fathers to let them go to college or pursue respected careers. It's just so far from my own lived experience that I have a very difficult time connecting with the story.
Well, and Reuven's going the other way.
Right.
Like he
wants to be a rabbi now.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's even like that far off from what his father wanted. His father is still, deeply religious man, and I don't think he would be embarrassed at all for his son to move in that direction.
Right, but he wants to be like a modern day rabbi.
Yeah, not Hasidic. Father and son hug, sobbing, and when they next see each other, Danny is clean-shaven and on the way to Columbia University to pursue his psychology degree. His father's silent treatment has finally broken. Reuven's voiceover closes the film with a story from their religious texts.
There is a story in the Talmud about a king who had a son who had gone astray from his father. The son was told, "Return to your father," the son said. "I cannot." Then his father sent a messenger to say, "Return as far as you can, and I will come to you the rest of the way."
Credits roll on Danny walking down the street to leave for his new school. The end. That's The Chosen.
I actually really liked it.
Yeah. I mean,
I thought it was well made. I thought it was an interesting representation of, different factions within the Jewish religion. I was engaged with the story the whole time. I wasn't bored. I thought the acting was great. Like, I think it's a well-made movie.
I do. I just wish it had more of a message. Unless the message is just supposed to be, don't be mean to your kids because your religion said to, or because your dad was mean to you. And if that's the message, then I'm connecting with it. Yeah. But I feel like a lot of they spend so much time on the particulars of their beliefs that I feel like they want us to be invested in any of that, and I'm really not.
Oh, I wasn't invested in any of that stuff either, but I do feel like that is the message of the story. It's just that both of these men, in different regards, didn't take care of their children the way they should have because they were so wrapped up in something that didn't matter as much.
I can see the hurt that Reb Saunders is causing to Danny much more than I can see the hurt that Reuven's father is doing to him. I feel like it should have been
more equal.
I think we should have seen him, "Dad, you were going to come to my thing," or "Dad, I need a ride to this thing," or "You never let me do anything." Like, they should have been at odds a little bit more, because the way it's presented is almost like this is a good dad and this is a bad dad.
Oh, I didn't really take it as that. I mean, I feel like they started there, but then by the end they were showing that they both had their flaws.
Yeah, but Mr. Malter is always like hugging his son and encouraging him in his every pursuit. Like, anything he wants to do, his dad's like, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Go do that. I wish you guys could be friends. I'm sorry it didn't work out."
Well, this is where we needed the consequence for the gun.
Yeah.
The gun excursion.
That would have been a great place for them to overstep the boundaries of appropriate relationship.
Like, I thought this is what you wanted me to do, Father.
And it's like, this is what I want to happen, but it's not what I want for you.
Because the father was so dedicated to his cause, he's ignoring the raising of his son at this point. His son goes off, does what he thinks is right, and,
the father realizes, oh no, I've led him to this.
Yeah. And it's like, literally, the reason I'm fighting so hard is because I don't want this problem to affect you at all. And here you are involving yourself in it in a major way, in a way that could kill you easily.
But that doesn't happen.
and when he finds out that kid was putting guns on crates to Palestine. He's all smiles immediately.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why are you happy about that? Like, I get that it's the cause that you wanted, but do you want your kids to be forced to do this stuff? That's terrible.
I feel Reuven's story is very underdeveloped because when I finished the movie, I was like, well, this is really just Danny's movie. Like,
right, yeah.
Danny has a goal. He goes through adversity, having it out with his father's blessing, and he goes off to fulfill his dreams. Reuven wants to be a rabbi, but we don't see him progressing towards that goal ever.
Right.
In the movie.
I think we do get a little bit of him coming out of his shell when he's with the family. But I feel like so much of that should be undone by the argument at the dinner table when he realizes, oh, these people don't care about interpersonal relationships the way that they pretend to. All they care about is exactly what this old book says and how this old book says the world should go. And no one should ever break any of these rules or else. And if you disagree with me, I'm just going to scream until everyone leaves the dinner table. Because that's what happened when Reb Saunders got angry.
I think this movie was never going to be that with all the various people that were attached to it. I don't think that that's the point that this movie was trying to make.
Yeah, I think it bothers me that so much of the film is spent trying to establish in our minds that Reb Saunders is a very intelligent man and that he's just as intelligent as Reuven's father. And yet, he is so close-minded in the way that he's willing to bring up his children, or even the way that he's willing to absorb reality from people, that I won't even let people tell me things or share ideas at my table because I already have this old book that says what I'm supposed to think, and I'll just scream it at you until you agree with me. And it's like, that makes me wish that Mr. Malter hadn't said, he's much smarter than me. His writing is much better than mine. And it's like, why is that true? All he's doing is repeating talking points from these old books.
You know, it's something that I do appreciate from this film because I was certain that the sister was going to end up
breaking from the family.
Yeah,
for him.
But what I really appreciate is that they didn't do that. That Danny says, this is our tradition. This is what we do. And she can't be yours.
Right.
Like, it's never going to happen. And then they just respect that and move on.
Yeah, it's not about Reuven trying to, rescue her from this.
Yeah.
Even though he does mention it again later as a point of, here's why I deeply disagree with Reb Saunders.
But there was no value judgment on that moment, where he's like, no, that's wrong. I gotta get her out of this. Or or my love for her is more important than that.
I think he does kind of make that judgment later when he's with his father, though, not to their faces. But when he's with his father, he's like, oh, they marry off their children and stuff like that. And his dad's like, calm down.
He can feel that way, but he doesn't do anything about it.
And his father also makes the point that it's like, if these people hadn't stuck so strictly together, then the faith wouldn't even be around anymore. Because they needed to form a very tight-knit group, and they needed to all be on the same page for a long time to not have been eradicated by the world that was constantly targeting them. Yeah, no, I love the performances and everything. It's just, I really have a hard time with these kind of stories where it's like an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid is having to ask permission to study psychology. And it's like, I can't even wrap my head around it. I get that some people are in that situation. But for me, I was like, hey, mom and dad, I kind of want to make movies. I'm going to go to film school. And they were like, cool. See you later. It wasn't like I was asking their permission. I was just informing them where I applied. Yeah, it's like I applied to one school because I heard they had a film program. I didn't have a backup school. I was literally just like, I'm going to go study film. They have it out there and it's supposed to be good. And they never said well, are you sure you don't want to do something that's going to, it's like, they were just like, okay, do what you're going to do. You're a person. You're a person now.
Yeah.
You get to pick.
I mean, I feel like you weren't, obviously my parents were not like that either in any way, but having spent 12 years in Catholic school, I saw a lot of families that were, like this.
Yeah, I'm not at all saying that it's an unrealistic thing. I get that a lot of people go through this. It's just not something personally that I felt connected to because it was never. Maybe that's a privileged situation where I'm just like I was never in a situation.
You haven't been exposed to extreme religious views.
Yeah, I am really, because there are people that are trapped in it that don't get to make any of their life decisions, and. Maybe there were even places where I would have preferred for my parents to have been like, maybe STEM, maybe get some kind of a
do something practical.
Bachelor's of Science, maybe instead of the BS degree, get an actual BS degree. But yeah, but everything worked out okay.
You got a podcast.
Still get to work on movies. So I think their logic was more that like when they were teenagers, my dad was like, I'm going to be a firefighter. And my mom was like, I'm going to be a flight attendant. And then that just worked out for 35 years. And they were like, are we going to tell him that he can't do the thing that he decided when he was a teenager? No. I'm not trying to be critical at all of the performances or how the film came together, but I can see why it made $200,000 more than it cost, because I don't feel like even in 82 that this was a story that so many people could relate to.
Oh no, not at all. I'm surprised it made as much money as it did. Like this is a film that people make because they're proud of their heritage and but it's not a film that appeals to a lot of people, but I still think it's a really well made movie.
Absolutely.
Well, and considering that it's partially about and not targeting like as in angry, but like it's like this is a film about Hasidism and what it's like to be that those people aren't going to see this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're making a movie about these people who can't. It'd be like a movie about the Amish.
Right.
It's like, we really want the Amish community to have representation. I hope they come to see this movie. It's like, they're not gonna.
Yeah.
I thought the movie was fine. Like I said, like in the end, especially when you were talking about like a sequel story.
Yeah.
Because I felt like this was them parting ways forever. Like,
and honestly, and even Reuven points out toward the end that it's like, Columbia's not that far. You're still going to be like within regular visiting distance. We're just not in the same neighborhood anymore. It's not a walk visit. But it sounds from the brief bit of premise that I did read that it kind of feels like a bit of a retread, where it's like now, he's going to school for psychology and Reuven is starting into like the rabbinical practice. And it's about both of them, like, again, coming to terms with their own religious upbringing and how that affects what they're interpreting these things. And also, finding things to disagree with each other on and overcoming those disagreements. I would hope that there's a bit of redemption for Danny in the second book, because I feel like this movie kind of makes him look like a desperate to please his father's son who's a bad friend, because his dad was like, hey, I don't like those ideas. And he's related to the guy who said them, so you can't talk to him anymore. And he's like, yes, father. Please love me. And he never, it's not like, it doesn't even seem hard for him to agree to that.
Well, that's also his kind of analytical and logical mind,
I guess,
like
but it just makes him seem inhuman.
Well, but that's part of it. I feel like he can dissociate and disconnect really easily because that's how he was brought up.
Right.
Like his father just didn't speak to him. So it's just like, oh, don't speak to my friend anymore? Yeah, no problem.
And when he, as a parent, saw his son knowing better than people, he said, I'm going to knock him down a few pegs. I'm not going to talk to him for a few years. And then he's going to lose all of his ego. And then he's just going to believe everything I say because he's just so desperate to hear words come out of my mouth. And it worked. He transformed his son into an obedient zombie. I mean, at least he still made the jump to getting this psychology degree and not following in his father's footsteps as the next rabbi of their particular brand of this religion. But it just felt like at the end of the movie, I didn't really like Danny because Danny was awful to Reuven and just so desperate for his dad's friendship. And then at the end, when his dad's like, yeah, I did all these terrible things, but you deserved it and you're welcome. And then they hug crying like this is like, oh, we've overcome this gap between us. And it's like, I guess if you just wanted to hug your dad, then take any opportunity. But
well, I don't know if it was, to me, I didn't interpret it so much of Reb saying, I did this, you should thank me. More of like, I did what I thought I did was how I was raised. Whether that was right or not, I'm not sure, but I did it.
Well, I wish he had said I'm not sure, because what he says is, you probably think what I did was cruel. I don't think so. I don't think it was cruel at all. And it's like, it was objectively cruel. Your son was tortured for years.
Yeah.
But he does have, I guess, one like half accepting his own faults line when he stands up and he's almost walking out of the room. And I think he says, maybe you could forgive me for not being a more intelligent father or something like that. And it's like the only time that he even semi-admits, I'm making some mistakes and I am sorry, but he never apologizes.
No.
He says, you should forgive me, but he never apologized, which I feel like that always bothers me when characters expect forgiveness without having done anything to earn it. But
Sure.
You can tell that Danny is desperate to forgive him anyway, because it's only weighing on Danny. So,
and poor Reuven in this scene is just like an ornament.
Right.
Like he has like almost no lines and he's just sitting there and he's not even looking at them while they're behind him.
Yeah, it's like he's only there because it would have been weird for such a major scene at the end of the film to not include the two main characters.
Right.
But really his only purpose in this scene is like at the very beginning he says, hey, I think I'm going to be a rabbi. And then the father and son have a long conversation with each other. But yeah, it's an interesting movie. What are we, thumbs up, thumbs down?
It's a thumbs up. Yeah.
It's a thumbs up, but I really can't think of too many people I would recommend the movie to. Like I can't think of like, I certainly don't think I'll probably ever watch it again anytime soon.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like just middle of the road kind of feelings about it.
I think I'm going to go thumbs up, but just like a hesitant thumbs up, like barely above a thumb sideways, because I didn't think that there was a very potent message here, or that the film agreed with the message that I got from it. Did you give an official ruling?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
You said
I
okay.
said it.
What are we thinking Letterboxd on this one?
Well, based on how you guys feel about this, I put it way higher than you.
Maybe. You never know with my list.
You never know. I have it at 16 out of 63.
Okay, you did.
It's below The Long Good Friday and above The Border.
I have it at 23, which puts it below Cat People, but above Evil Speak.
I have it in 38, which is just under Silent Rage and just above The Dorm That Dripped Blood.
Wait, it's below Silent Rage?
Yep.
Okay.
Don't worry. I got my priorities.
Got that frozen dog story in there. That's way more poignant.
Yeah. Our writer-director here was Jeremy Kagan. The writing was uncredited, but he apparently rewrote some of it. In the late 70s, he directs Scott Joplin, Heroes, and The Big Fix. After this, he directs The Sting 2, and later he transitions to TV movies and episodes like Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, Picket Fences, Ally McBeal, and The West Wing. The writer of the novel was Chaim Potok. This was his only novel ever adapted to film, and his only other IMDb credit is for playing the Talmud teacher in this film. So he's in that room where they're all reading the book and doing pop quizzes. The screenplay writer was Edwin Gordon. This is his only IMDb credit. The music here is from Elmer Bernstein. Before this, he scores Return of the Seven, True Grit, Animal House, Meatballs, and The Great Santini. So far on the show, he scores Saturn III, Airplane, Going Ape, Stripes, Heavy Metal, An American Werewolf in London, and Honky Tonk Freeway. He's back this season with 5 Days, One Summer, Airplane 2, and next season with Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, Trading Places, and Class. Later, he scores Ghostbusters, The Black Cauldron, Spies Like Us, Three Amigos, The Grifters, Cape Fear, The Good Son, Canadian Bacon, Bulletproof, Wild Wild West, and Far From Heaven. And I'm pretty sure his son scored Silent Rage, so that makes sense that I put the Bernstein scores next to each other. The cinematographer here was Arthur J. Ornitz. He previously lit one of my favorites, 1,000 Clowns, as well as Charlie, The Boys in the Band, and so far on the show, House of Dark Shadows, Serpico, Death Wish, An Unmarried Woman, and Tattoo. He's back this season for his final feature film, Hanky Panky. The editor here was David Garfield. He previously cut Hero at Large and Silent Rage for the show. He followed director Kagan to The Sting 2 next season. Later, he cuts All the Right Moves, Karate Kid 2, Vice Versa, and It Takes Two, the sequel to It Takes. No, that's not true. The other editor was Howard E. Smith. This is his first editing credit. He's back this season with Tex, and later Twilight Zone the movie, Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend, Near Dark, The Abyss, Point Break, Glengarry Glen Ross, Strange Days, Dante's Peak, and Snakes on a Plane. Maximilian Schell played Professor David Malter. Before this, he was in Judgment at Nuremberg, Krakatoa East of Java, The Odessa File, A Bridge Too Far, and The Black Hole. He won a Best Actor Oscar for Judgment at Nuremberg and a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for Julia in 1978. He also worked earlier with Eli Landau on The Man in the Glass Booth in 1975 for a Best Actor nomination. After this, he shows up in The Freshman and Deep Impact. Rod Steiger played Reb Saunders. He had previously collaborated with producer Eli Landau in 1964's Pawnbroker, and 4 years before this film, he'd played Pontius Pilate in Jesus of Nazareth. Before this, he's in Oklahoma. He's Al Capone in 59's Al Capone. He's in Dr. Zhivago, In the Heat of the Night for an Oscar win, and The Amityville Horror. We've seen him now in Klondike Fever, and he was practically unrecognizable in our back-to-back reviews of Lion of the Desert as Mussolini and Catalanian Little Britches as Sheriff Tillman. Along the same lines, we just saw him a couple episodes back as the psychotic Charlie character from Wolf Lake. And again, he's made an impressive transformation between neighboring titles, though Wolf Lake sat on a shelf for a couple years between its production and wide release. After this, he's in Mars Attacks, The Hurricane, and Pool Hall Junkies. Robby Benson played Danny Saunders. Because of the film's meager budget, he agreed to a fifth of his usual rate because he was very interested in playing the part. We obviously just had him last week as the lead of Henry Jaglom's segment of National Lampoon's Movie Madness anthology. We've covered a lot of his credits last week, but here we've seen him in Die Laughing, Tribute, and he's best known to modern audiences as the voice of the Beast in Disney's Beauty and the Beast. And he also just joined the cast of Severance in the second season. Barry Miller played Reuven Malter. We've seen him now in Voices and Fame. Later he's in Peggy Sue Got Married and The Last Temptation of Christ. Hildy Brooks played Mrs. Saunders. Before this, she's in The Anderson Tapes and The Iceman Cometh. We've seen her so far in The Killings at Outpost Zeta, which was a minisode that I did. Looked direct to video, real cheap. Ron Rifkin was the baseball coach. He's also in Silent Running, Fuzz, The Sunshine Boys, The Sting 2, JFK, Manhattan Murder Mystery, LA Confidential, and The Sum of All Fears. Robert John Burke played Levi Saunders. This was his first film appearance. After this, he plays RoboCop in RoboCop 3. He's in Tombstone, Thinner, Copland, and more recently, Black Klansman. Lonnie Price played Davy. After this, he's in The Muppets Take Manhattan and Dirty Dancing. Evan Handler played Sidney Goldberg. We saw him last in Taps. Later, he's in Natural Born Killers, and he had recurring roles on The West Wing, Sex and the City, Californication, and he recently reprised his character for the Sex and the City reboot and Just Like That. That's the name of the reboot. Douglas Warhit played Sam. This was his first feature film. Later, he's in Private School, Christine, Body Double, Beverly Hills Cop, and Look Who's Talking 2. Jeffrey Marcus played Schwartzy. We saw him last in Endless Love, and after this, he's in a lot of Alien Nation TV movies and Freaky Friday. Stuart Charno played First Baseman. We had him last as Ted in Friday the 13th Part 2, and he's back this season for Young Doctors in Love. Later, he's in Christine, Just One of the Guys, Once Bitten, Sleepwalkers, and he's the puppet in X-Files episode Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. Richard Lifshitz played Hasidic Coach. Later, he's in Aronofsky's debut film Pi. Clement Fowler played Doctor. He's back this season in Diner. John Pankow played Bully. This was his first film, and he's back later in The Hunger, Rambo First Blood Part 2, To Live and Die in L.A., The Secret of My Success, Batteries Not Included, and Monkey Shines. Richard Ziman played another bully. Later, he's in Clockers, Hackers, Private Parts, and Death to Smoochie. Bruce McVitie played the third bully. After this, he's in The Cotton Club, The Whoopie Boys, Born on the 4th of July, The Doors, and 54. Jack Hollander played the psychology professor. Before this, he was Fats in Rocky. Elaine Kagan, not to be confused with Elena Kagan, played V.E. Day Woman. I think that's the girl that kisses him in the street. Later, she's in The Sting 2, Coming to America, Goodfellas, and Traffic. Iva Rifkin plays another V.E. Day woman, so it's one of those two. She's also in The Sting 2. Val Avery played College Dean. Before this, he's in The Magnificent Seven, HUD, Vanishing Point, and The Anderson Tapes. We've seen him now in Vanishing Point, obviously, Papillon, Brubaker, Gloria, Continental Divide, and Sharky's Machine. He's back this season in Jinxed, and later The Sting 2, The Pope of Greenwich Village, and Donnie Brasco. Danton Stone played Fighting Student. Later, he's in 8 Men Out, McHale's Navy, and Todd Solondz's Palindromes. Mark Nelson played the other fighting student. He was Ned in the first Friday the 13th, and later First Wives Club. Nama Potok played Party Guest, presumably some relation of the novelist whose work inspired the film. No other credits. Laura Delano played another party guest. We've seen her now in The Warriors, Fame, and Stardust Memories. Tony Munifo played a watchman. He's a regular producer of Stallone films. We've seen him so far in Voices, Just Tell Me What You Want, The Exterminator, The Idolmaker, and Nighthawks, in which Joe Spinell's character was named Lieutenant Munifo after him, and then Prince of the City. He's back this season with parts in Fighting Back and Author. Ed Herlihy played newsreel announcer, but As I've already stated, I don't think that was him. I believe that was Frank Welker. Herlihy was basically the predecessor to Ed McMahon on The Tonight Show, opposite Johnny Carson's predecessor, Jack Parr. Later this season, he appears in Scorsese's The King of Comedy. Herlihy also shows up in Zelig, Police Academy 2, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Malcolm X. Frank Maxwell played radio announcer. Before this, he's in Mr. Majestic, and this was his final film appearance. Bob Drew played a radio announcer. We've seen him so far in Cheech and Chong's next movie, Fade to Black, and Underground Aces. Later, he's in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Back to School, and Repossessed. Zvi Schuyler played Bal Cora. He was previously in Fiddler on the Roof, Lady Ice, The Mad Adventures of Rabbi Jacob, and The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. Jerry Winsett played Batterball player, so that's what they're playing, Batterball? After this, he's in One Crazy Summer, Iron Man 3, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Missouri or Missouri?
I mean, if you're a normal person, you pronounce it Missouri. If you're from Missouri, you pronounce it Missouri.
Missouri? Okay. Well, I'm from there now. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And an episode of Donald Glover's Atlanta. I think that's everything for The Chosen. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, you can find all our socials at linktree/vintagevideopod. And if you really like the show, maybe you should join our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/vintagevideopodcast for access to all our monthly 70s reviews and a hand in choosing next month's film. Patrons are currently choosing between Capone, Death Race 2000, Dolomite, The Passenger, The Reincarnation of Peter Proud, Rooster Cogburn, Super Vixens, Switchblade Sisters, or The 10 Little Indians for a 50th anniversary review next month. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time when we'll be discussing Partners, which IMDb describes like so. A heterosexual police detective is unnerved when ordered to go undercover with a homosexual police clerk as a couple to solve a series of murders in the gay community. We leave you now with with the trailer for Partners.
Following in the footsteps of such great crime fighters as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, Charlie Chan, Hercule Poirot, the Lone Ranger, and Tonto, we now proudly present Benson and Kerwin.
What can I do for you?
You two are going to handle this case together.
Keep your hands to yourself. He's mine.
Oh.
I just spent 10 years on homicide to be mauled by some old queen.
I want you to live as a gay couple.
Mr. Macho meets his mismatch. Ryan O'Neal is Benson, 100% all-male tough hero cop. John Hurt is not. Partners.
We were your age when we moved in, John and I. Oh, children.
I think you could have waited a little while before you threw our first orgy. Listen, we're not going to get anywhere with this faggot. Why don't we just cut our losses right now, sir?
Don't be a sexist. Go back, hold his hand, and get the job done.
What are you doing? Are we on a case or a shopping expedition? I'm behind with the laundry. And stop ironing my damn underwear. Guys don't iron other guys' clothes. Well, get a load of weepy over here. I must be the only cop in the world that's got a partner that cries.
Knock it off, both of you.
Why did you choose me for this job?
Because you're a good cop, Benson. A real good cop.
My name is Benson. I'd like a word.
And because of your cute...
I beg your pardon? What time you get off? You just picked up the wrong guy. Well, what do we do now?
Take off the towel. Take off the towel.
No way.
I know how you feel.
I'm a cop.
God knows, he's done everything he can to hide it.
Maybe you're under a strain right now.
There's a problem, because he's bringing girls home.
Sir, I quit.
You guys are cops first.
Well, let's go, man!
Ryan O'Neal, John Hurt. Partners.